Hello, this is Jess,
And this is Edmond.
and we'd like to present to you our proposal for a water conservation campaign here in the Central Valley. According to an Orange County Register article from February of this year, 94% of registered voters in California consider the state's more than 3-year water shortage to be at least serious, with a full 68% considering the situation extremely serious. However, just 34% are okay with the state imposing mandatory rationing, while 61% still favor the state's current policy of asking residents to voluntarily cut back on water use. So, how seriously are Californians taking the drought? Our audience doesn't view the drought as a serious issue. On top of that, conservation is viewed as a short-term solution to a temporary problem. These are the perceptions that we hope to change. Charles Fishman, who is an award-winning business writer, said this: "The era of water is over. We will not, going forward, have water that has all three of the qualities at the same time. The qualities being unlimited, unthinkingly inexpensive, and safe." According to Fishman, one of the big problems of water is that the success of the golden age of water has created an invisible system, an invisible utility. We don't even take water for granted because taking it for granted would suggest that we pay attention to it. The hidden system is corroding, and as it corrodes, it even corrodes our support for public water.
We know that perception is a significant barrier to participation. Changing that pre-existing perception is vital to stimulating participation in water conservation. Evaluating the potential effectiveness of different outreach strategies shows that educating about the reasoning for water rationing is most effective. We must show our audience that running out of water is a very real possibility, and that the way in which we consume our fresh water must change if we are to have a sustainable relationship with our supply. The goal of our campaign is to engage our audience with this information and use an iconic image to steer their interest. Our campaign is
A world without water. Our campaign will convey the consequences that will occur if our attitudes do not change. It's not political, it is simply a result of our behavior if our course of action is not corrected. A world without water is a brand we will apply across a broad spectrum of mediums.
the simplistic concept of a water conservation program does not reflect the reality of how people use water or how municipal water providers manage demand. In reality, conservation communications are not a single initiative, but rather a portfolio of often interrelated but independently operated programs targeting specific behaviors and market segments.
Effective conservation outreach efforts focus on bridging the chasm between thought and action to induce behaviors such as participating in an incentive program or complying with water use regulations, such as mandatory irrigation restrictions.
For our communication strategy, we will focus on the 3 E's. Educate. If our audience doesn't understand the necessity of conservation, they will not feel motivated to do so. We plan to show them the facts. Conservation is the cheapest, most reliable, and quickest way to stretch the water supplies. Empower. Once we have shown our audience the power of our message, we will give them the tools and techniques to make a difference.
Evaluate. We need to set milestones, goals, and timetables to measure and evaluate the awareness of water conservation as well as the behavioral differences. To do this, results will be ascertained from many sources, including our social media interactions as well as surveys, both online and over the phone, to measure public attitude. Every survey will include the question, "Are you aware of the World Without Water conservation campaign?" More importantly, actual water consumption rates from the utility departments will be compared to observe actual conservation behaviors.
It is necessary to educate our audience about the current drought within our state. We must show our audience the facts about California's water supply. Lessened snowpack in the Sierra Nevada has contributed to the current drought, which is entering its 4th year. Certain estimates put our groundwater supply at just 1 year remaining. And we must explain how water conservation is effective at rationing water.
A new era of water. While the drought is an important catalyst, it is not the only threat to our water supply. We know that, particularly in the Central Valley, our groundwater is depleting rapidly. Our consumers and farmers cannot count on years of consistent rain. We need to change the behaviors and attitudes of the public towards water management and use.
Step 2 of our communication strategy is to empower. With techniques to conserve, we'll give our audience the tools to responsibly use water and challenge their beliefs as careless consumers of water.
We'll want to cultivate a conservation culture. Using our social media and targeted advertising, we aim to generate a positive, responsible attitude towards water conservation. This is achievable based on education of the reality of water usage. Here you can see some examples of water conserving techniques we will give to our audience through social media platforms. So, what avenues will we take to educate and empower our audience? Hashtag World Without Water, a social media hashtag designed for users to share and popularize when posting conservation related content. It will appear across our educational materials, posters, videos, pamphlets, and of course, our social media posts. Our social media will span Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope, Snapchat, and any other platform you can name.
Online, our videos and advertisements will target online streaming sites, for example, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and others. Depicting a literal world without water, our media will draw attention to the importance of water in daily life. Limited advertisements will be run in a few prestigious publications, depending on funding levels. But the real promotion of a larger grassroots print campaign, where we will create and distribute templates for signs and posters to be put up in yards, businesses, and on campuses.
Public engagement is very important to World Without Water. At high schools and universities, we will promote with our public speakers and awareness representatives who will engage the public. At environmental conferences, our public speakers, booths, and awareness representatives will equally represent our brand and our cause.
We need to identify partners and sponsors in order to promote and assist in our campaign. These may include government agencies, water supply utilities, similar campaign organizers, and private companies, keen to promote a socially responsible image. In exchange for the monetary support of our cause, we will give endorsement to these companies that practice responsible water use.
Our target markets. Unlike other conservation campaigns, ours will focus on young people as well as adults in the Central Valley. Influencing young people's behaviors and attitudes these days can be effectively done through social media platforms. A change in the attitudes of young minds will pass through to future generations. In addition, changing the perception of adults, although difficult, can be very effective in helping us reach our desired goals of lower consumption rates.
Our campaign will be segmented into three different categories. First, the farmers. Since 80% of the water in California is used for farming, the water crisis should be their primary concern. Although most farmers are aware of it, more action needs to be taken. Farmers have already agreed with the state officials to reduce their water usage even more this year. This means that part of their crops will have to remain unplanted, or they must find other ways to reduce consumption. This will lead to further losses in profit compared to the past. However, these actions are necessary to ensure the survival of California's agricultural industry. Even though there may be losses now, the new habit of consumption will better equip them for future drought and water shortages.
And the second segment, households. Unlike farmers, who are already implementing new techniques for more efficient use, most households are still in the dark about water conservation. Our primary focus should be about changing their perception and after that providing tips on how to conserve. Here is where social media is very effective to reach out to the public.
The third segment is industries. Most businesses assume that conserving water reduces their profitability, which is wrong. Conserving water will actually increase profits. In this case, we need to reach out to managers to raise their awareness and encourage them to transform their workplace into a water conserving environment. Our approach to making businesses emphasize on saving water should stress on the advantages of saving water. These include reducing costs, since water accounts to 1 to 2% of overhead costs. Production efficiency, which makes more water available for production. Educate about rebates and tax incentives offered by the government for businesses that have implemented proven water-saving methods. As we discussed earlier, the third part of our EEE communication strategy is to evaluate the effectiveness of our campaign. Short and long-term monitoring of water consumption rates, hand in hand with social media interactions, and the surveys we conduct to measure our campaign's awareness should give us an idea of our effectiveness.
The most important thing we must do to measure our effectiveness is to pay attention to the correlation between audience members who have heard of our campaign and actual water consumption rates of those members. By enacting each of the three elements of our communication strategy, education, empowerment, and evaluation, our campaign can start to make a real difference in how the local public consumes their water. Because if experts like Charles Fishman are correct, we need to start to move to a model where we have a world with responsible water use.
Thank you for listening.
We look forward to your questions.